Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans in business. I'm Patrick Murphy here with Dan Kunze.
Today's guest was an Airborne Ranger qualified infantry officer with expertise in big data, cybersecurity, and AI. He's now the chairman and CEO of CrowdPoint Technologies and the chairman of Spectral Capital. Please welcome Sean Brehm.
Hey, Sean, great being with you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, man. Hey, listen, we always start our interviews with bluff, bottom line up front. So bottom line up front, technology has never moved faster in world history. What should business owners and folks who run companies expect in the near future?
Well, the whole reason why it's moving at the speed it's moving is because it's all about moving data information, because information makes things actionable. So you can expect in the next 5 years, no pun intended, you're going to see some quantum transformations. You're going to see cloud infrastructure changing. You're going to see data security changing, especially in the area of cybersecurity. So the next 5 years, the average business owner is going to find themselves asking questions like, what's my post-quantum security look like?
Yeah, no doubt. And you got your start at IBM after the military. So tell us about what was it like working for IBM Defense and Intel.
Yeah, I mean, just a former troglodyte, like the 11 Bravo, with a math background, jumped into some interesting situations and ended up finding myself at IBM, working there. Was able to exit there and start another company called Yahoo and sold that. Moved into cybersecurity and now I'm into quantum. And I think what makes it real simple about quantum computing is it's coming and but it's not very tangible right now. So my whole mission, just like it was when I was a captain, is how do I make it translatable for the troops? And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to crawl, walk, run the average business owner to get ready into quantum.
Yeah, there's a difference between operating a business and there's a difference in investing in businesses. And generally, operators are working within the context that they're in, and investors are a little bit maybe further ahead of that. Can you talk a little bit more about how investors can keep up with that pace of change and not just business owners?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say to investors is, one thing you need to understand about what's coming. And in the next few days, I'm going to be making an announcement that I wish I could have said today with you guys, because how fitting to say with a veteran. But the world is changing so fast. The country that dominates quantum computing will dominate the global economy for the next 100 years, at least 50 years. And so what investors need to look at is they need to start understanding where quantum is, spend a little bit of time on understanding what it isn't, and then start looking at how to get involved in that environment. Because the chances, let me make it even more simple. It's 1994 already, but I'm not Brian Gumble trying to figure out what the @ symbol means for the internet. And for those of you that remember that, it's going to be the same overnight. Things are going to change. It's history's repeating itself, and we're blessed. The three of us are blessed enough to be in a position where, like the telegraph got changed by the telephone. Well, we just saw just 30 something years ago, the internet come out, and here we are at quantum and all those guys. God, I wish I got into Yahoo Finance back in the day, right? Well,
Right.
now's your chance, because no matter what, whether you just need to get into quantum, you need to spend some time understanding it. And if you don't, here's the good news. If you don't understand what the current classical systems are, you got a chance to leapfrog ahead and learn a little bit about quantum and not have to worry about going back and reading over again.
Yeah, I mean, I think your advice is like, don't be Blockbuster, basically, because you're saying, hey, listen, in the 90s, it was all about the internet, and Blockbuster was raging back in the day. And now you have to be investing and be pretty fluent in quantum. Why is that the case? And what advice do you get to folks to get their feet wet and get involved?
Well, the main reason you need to get involved is I ask most, even people that interview me, I ask them, do you know the difference between data and information? And what the average investor needs to know is the difference between data and information. Data, like oil, is just dead, lumpy dinosaur. Until it's refined by some petroleum engineers, it just stays data. Information, if you look from a military context, is information has to have spatial, temporal, thematic, and semantic meaning. And so when you are trying to understand how to get into this space, as long as you understand that the whole purpose for quantum is to surface information faster from the data that's available. And, the standard answer is it's going to create drug discovery. It's going to do this in finance. No, the bottom line is there's so much data around the world today that we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what questions to ask. When you get into the quantum space, you'll be able to have a conversation with the data and be able to get your answers sooner, faster, and more intelligible.
Yeah, there's so much FUD in the world as it relates to data, information, its impact on the global economy. I really like to segment on national security for a second, though, just because I think when we think about the Department of Defense and we think about adopting new technologies, or even if you broaden out and say U.S. government or the broader national security apparatus, what does emerging technology like quantum computing mean? How does the DoD have to infrastructure themselves to support it? And like, what are they missing, and what do they need to go do?
So what the Department of Defense, or those, if you're sitting right now and you're a, 05, 06, and you're starting to get handed this thing by some staffing officer, some general officer, the thing you need to understand, first of all, is that the existing classical compute systems will not survive a query from a quantum computer, not an attack, just a query, because the volume of things coming at you to speed it up. It's like Star Trek. Something's going to come out of the Stargate instantly, stand right in front of you, ask you a million questions, and bring your systems down. So the first thing that you have to prioritize, just like we learned a long time ago as cadets, even, which is a reserve is a reserve is a reserve. So unless the Department of Defense is not looking at how they can secure data more efficiently offline and how to provide post-quantum security today, then they can't advance beyond the defensive position. They have to focus on, let's really get good at post-quantum security yesterday. And if you're not, you're already behind.
Yeah, there's been a whole lot of talk around Elon Musk and this Doge concept and this Doge principle. And sometimes they think about it as like a cost reduction basis. What it sounds to me like is, how do we re-engineer the infrastructure to support modernization at scale? And then what do we get rid of to be able to support in the future? So that's what it sounds like to me. Probably not an easy task, but I think that's for all of the national security apparatus. Do you have any opinions about that? Or like, what do you think on that topic?
I'm kind of the contrarian in that space,
Yeah, please.
because I think, honestly, like when you see the Google thing announcement recently,
Yeah.
it's interesting, but it's not important. And let me explain why. And you're not going to hear this from anybody else, but this is 11 Bravo simple. At the end of the day, you've got an issue right now where you're building these quantum computers. But if you really understand what's going on, is these quantum computers need a special way to compute. In other words, the data has to be prepared in a special way. And so what that means is, it's a lot like going all the way back to the 60s with the space race. And if you don't have a punch card, you're not going to compute something. So right now, the problem is 99.99999% of the world is on a classical compute system. And none of those classical compute systems speak with the quantum systems. So Google's sitting there probably doing a jabuki dance. That's awesome. But guess what? Unless you're solving the problem of bridging in a practical manner classical systems with quantum systems, then it's interesting, but it's not important. What's more important is when someone goes on the offense from a quantum system into a classical system. And that's where you need to focus on first, on just understanding post-quantum security. Now, there's some things that are in the pipeline that I wish I could have told you guys that had been awesome, but there are some emerging technologies that the big guys aren't looking at. And I think that's one of the good things about operating in austere environments, is we kind of figure out how to get things to work no matter what, especially when you're with a limited budget. But there are some technologies that are coming out that are really taking a more practical approach, kind of a bridge between classical systems and quantum systems. And I'm predicting those companies are going to be the ones that the experts, right, didn't see coming.
Yeah,
It's the guys that sit there and go, look, I don't have unlimited budget. I'm not sitting there leveraging, $1 trillion market cap so I can burn money, like a drunken sailor. I'm going to focus on building something practical that's going to get me to the quantum environment and still support the classical compute systems. And I honestly, whether it's us or someone else out there, I'm sure there's another one out there, they're the ones that are going to win in the long run, because you just can't expect to sit there and go, well, we're just going to play in this quantum world by ourselves, and let's just forget the rest of the world operating in classical compute. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, it's like the picks and shovels and bridges that connect one world to the next world. And how do you create an economy or an ecosystem around that, right? And so we think, and you talked about austere environments, and we talk about military service and the things that you learn in military service that translate to your business career. Can you talk a little bit about your service and how that's translating in your business career?
Yeah, keep it 11 Bravo simple, as you said.
I think the biggest thing I learned, especially growing up as, commanding a platoon and eventually moving up to captain and then moving on to some interesting programs, um, is that what we learn at a very young age is a reserve is a reserve is a reserve. We're always worried about when all heck goes to a handbasket, right? And I think that's the biggest thing that I think is going to steer us well in the quantum areas, especially veterans, because you're now essentially, let me put it in simple terms to all the other combat guys out there. It's a movement to contact, and we don't know really what's out there. And we've got a plan, but no plan survives first contact, and especially quantum. So you got to be able to respond extremely fast. You've got to get and the hardest part about this is you constantly have to learn because it's evolving so fast. So that means you really got to have your eyes and ears well forward of where you're at to start looking at trends that are going in the marketplace. That's why I think military officers are going to excel in this environment because it is evolving and we're used to evolving. And quite frankly, we're all comfortable in the evolving environment.
That's right. You always got to look around that corner and see when the next target is going to come. So, hey, Sean, listen, That's awesome. We're going to be right back with you. More from Sean Brehm when we come back. Welcome back to Warrior Money. We're joined by Sean Brehm. Sean, you're an airborne ranger. Appreciate you. What are some of the advice that you learned when you transitioned out that you give the young soldiers, young entrepreneurs now?
Do not pigeonhole yourself on who you were, but who you want to be. If you're an 11 Bravo, look at me. Like I'm sitting in high tech, right? If you're in IT and working for DISA or you're inside the Signal Corps, don't be pigeonholed by what you've done, but take it as a chance to leverage what you learned in the military and take that ability to adapt, take that ability to overcome, and take that ability to innovate and just run as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes we we think about strategy, execution, and vision, and we put strategy and vision together when really we just need to move through and execute our way through the strategy as long as we have a vision. And I think that's a really unique military concept. Can you talk a little bit about your transition into private sector? Like, there's a lot of commonality between you and all our guests, which is like you leave an institution, a big well-known institution, and then you go to a big well-known institution, and then you figure out that you're really an entrepreneur, you're really better off as the entrepreneur mindset. Can you talk about those practical steps that you took from where you were to the IBM world to the smaller, more entrepreneurial world to help folks understand what that transition looks like?
Yeah, let me give you a very simple analogy. You think because you came from a big institutional environment that you're going to find a home in another big institutional environment. First of all, my recommendation is do it. You're going to learn from it because when you get into a company that's running things like Six Sigma and Kaizen mentality, what you're going to find out is that they're really good at systems. But the part you're not going to like about it is they're not going to be able to shoot, move, and communicate quickly. That things are going to move slowly. So, for a guy that maybe, let's say, is used to, more of an a rapid deployment unit, all of a sudden you find yourself at core, you're not going to be happy. But what you need to look at when you get out, don't worry about going institutional because you're going to get skill sets from that. They're going to let you pull back on that entrepreneurial spirit you had, especially if you're a combat arms guy, and jump into and excel because you have to get a new education on how to survive in the commercial world.
And you did that. You did that obviously several times, but talk to us now about CrowdPoint Technologies. You're the founder and CEO of it, AI, blockchain, secure systems. Walk us through how you started that and what it's all about.
Yeah, so essentially, it's basically a CrowdPoint's an intellectual property company. We saw that the intersection of commercial and capital markets were coming at lightning speed. But what we saw was there was a lot of issues with it. When you look at the cyber growth problem, the cyber security issue, the thing that stuck out to me is, we've got all these companies going public on the cyber markets, but cybercrime has got a Phillips curve. It's still going up. So Danger Will Robinson just didn't make sense. If cybersecurity is supposed to help us, why are we still losing in an asymmetric way to 16-year-old kids from Moldova? And then when you start looking at why cybersecurity is so bad, it's about the data. At the end of the day, people want our commercial activities. They want to hack it. They want to synthesize it with other data sets, create a smarter bit of information, cleanse it 16 times, and push it back out into the capital markets. And let me give you a case in point. I mean, look at all your hedge funds. They use alt data every day, right? And so when you can enrich data from many different vectors, you get a more clear operational picture of where the market's going. And so the value of all our personal data combined really determines the global capital markets. Our commercial purchases are categorized by a global industrial categorization standard called GICS, and that GICS is what is the benchmark of the S&P. So what I thought was, well, gosh, what if we could go back to the Buttonwood Agreement of 1792, provide the ability to secure data to the people who own it, let them determine when to release it, have governance and lineage back to the who owned it to begin with, and figure out how to not only monetize the data, but make more efficient, open, and honest, stable public markets as well. That was the grand vision. And along the way, it was so big, we had to move into quantum just to do the compute.
I love this blend that you're doing between the operational work and the seeing the future as it relates to running a business, and then the juxtaposition with, all right, we're going to invest in the next 10, 15, 20 years, which is your spectral capital company. That's how I perceive that. Can you talk a little bit more about blending the more here and now, the entrepreneurship that starts there, and then the venture side, which is like, let's get out in front of these emerging trends, and why you decided to create a capital company?
Yeah, look, I've done a couple great exits, and I'm blessed to have them. And I thought I'd stay a private guy because the first time you take a little bit of your winnings from your money you make at IBM, and then you handle the seed round, and then you bring a few friends and family in, and then you do your Series A and your Series B. When you hit your Series B, like, I'm a rock star because nobody makes it to Series B, so you're really happy. And then you exit and you sit there and go, well, what do I want to do next? Well, I don't want any venture money. I'm just going to do the whole thing over and over again. And while that's interesting, what I discovered is the capital markets, especially in a highly lucrative space, are one, going to give you a lot more opportunity to take that revenue that you are making and give you the ability and the freedom to maneuver more. I would have never considered myself in the capital markets, but when I built the company and we started focusing on building a distributed quantum ledger database, building decentralized clouds, these were Babe Ruth swings at the fence. And that's when I decided, it makes more sense to go to capital markets.
I have to ask the question because sometimes you hear news or you see the articles like this response to expended hours is because of the advance of Bitcoin and some of the other digital currencies that are out there. So I'm really interested on your perspective, like the traditional capital markets versus the Bitcoin cryptocurrency markets, and how you see that unfolding as these things work out. Because it's inevitable that you have to connect one another. So.
Look, you're asking a rule follower what he thinks about cryptocurrency. Yeah, like, former military officers, like, I do know how to color in the lines, right?
Yeah.
So what blockchain did, despite, my biggest problem with blockchain is it doesn't have any relationship to capital markets. It has no real digital asset value. In many ways, it's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. Some guy didn't have money, so he took money from the first guy to pay off the second guy. But what it did was one thing that was really amazing. What I really admire about the blockchain is it gave us a glimpse into the future. Wow, this ledger concept of immutability and transparency is pretty cool. Where they missed the mark was that they didn't understand the importance of custodianship. They didn't understand you need to be able to have the data behind it. And unfortunately, this guy in FTX figured out how to run a separate custodial database from the blockchain, and he was able to do a lot of harm. And I think what's going to happen is I think you're going to see a hybridization in the quantum ledgers where you can start looking at, you can still have cryptocurrency transactions, but they're going to be backed by demonstrable and auditable data sets behind them.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a minute to process that one, but the processing is that you've got a more secure or scalable and also attributable basis behind the currencies that you're describing or the transaction you're describing.
Exactly.
Is that a better way to say that, or for me to understand
Well,
it, to say it back to you?
Let me give you a practical example. If you look at Benjamin Franklin, he's extremely proud that he didn't write a colonial script unless it was backed by silver or backed by hemp, right? Wow, there's an interesting concept. So now all of a sudden you look at the ability to take these new emerging quantum digital assets that are emerging out there, leverage things like the blockchain, but still have a immutable, transparent ledger database that's quantum secure, that it has a connectivity back to a digital asset that's in the cryptocurrency space. Now you've got a really unique way. And I think, honestly, from a strategic perspective, I think if we do this right, we can ho hum about the emerging BRICS challenge that's out there.
Yeah. And how do you see it, Sean, from your perspective? I think you're calling it from Switzerland right now where we're talking to, but how is the EU handling this versus the United States?
I think when it comes to quantum, there is no difference because there's so few people that are in the mix right now. Everyone's realized that there's got to be kind of a transnational coalition. And then what better to take that transnational coalition and put it on an American market? So that's kind of the way I saw it is if I'm going to go out and pull the best of the best and the brightest of the world, why not throw it back on the American economy?
Yeah, I mean, usually the United States was basically the superpower when it talked about regulatory reform. Now it really is with the EU, but we are frankly just more business friendly, so it makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I work in the space industry, and you're seeing the same consolidation in space as it relates to people that are really making advances and want to be in front of this, because these emerging economies require really smart people to really understand what's trying to happen, and it really is location in specific when you get to it. Hey, there's some really heavy topics and some topics that a lot of people don't hear a lot about, and there's a whole heck of a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that surrounds it. Where do you think people should learn more about the topics we talked about and where this could go that you actually trust and that you think is a good place to learn more about it?
Well, one of the things I've done is you'll see a practical application of authentic intelligence. What authentic intelligence is, you can still leverage all the large language models that are out there, but you can put them in kind of left and right aiming stake limits so they don't meander. And so what we've done on the Spectral website at spectralcapital.com is we put an authentic intelligence in where you can ask it questions. If you want to understand, how an enhanced Sharpe ratio is going to redefine a financial alpha in the quantum era, or you want to understand what deterministic concurrency is, or what a qubit is, we've really tried to just suck everything out of our team's brains and just put it out there and really educate the market as much as we can, because the more the market's educated, obviously, sheepishly, we'll do better. But I think this is a national imperative. I think any veteran that's sitting out there, this is the space race, and we're going to get a lot more out of this in tag.
Oh, that's great. We do a rapid fire question and answering period that conclude every time that we go through this. We call it the Warrior Q&A. The first question is, who's a warrior that inspires you?
I would tell you my warrior is going to be George S. Patton.
What skills honed in your military service have served you well in business?
Planning for a highly changing environment.
And what's some money advice that you know now that you wish you knew earlier in life?
Just taking that LAS step the first time you make O3 and buying a BMW, dumb decision. Just focus on the Ford truck.
And save your money, use it as capital for the future. Yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
Hey, Sean, I love the General Patton as your favorite warrior. One of my favorite quotes from General Patton was, people think about loyalty from the bottom up. Rare do you see loyalty from the top down. And that's what he looked in for his officers when he was the commanding general in World War II. So, hey, thanks so much for joining us today. That's our show. Listen, subscribe, and review Warrior Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcast, or find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you next week.